Hello and welcome to the 20th DataCloud Global Congress in the south of France. I'm now joined by Michael Tobin, philanthropist and entrepreneur in the digital infrastructure space for more than 40 years. Michael, thank you so much for talking to me.
Pleasure, Joe. Always a pleasure.
I must add a caveat that 40 years, you started at a very young age as well.
I did, at 16. I left school at 16 and did my electronic apprenticeship, so yeah. I'm actually quite old, I just use good cream.
What cream do you use? No,
it's a cocktail.
It was nice seeing you. How many DataClouds have you been to? Because you've been to pretty much...
Dozens. So yeah, going back probably more than a decade now, right? So starting off in the Monaco, Grimaldi.
Yeah,
and now in this labyrinth, this crazy place here where no one can find their way in and out. But yeah, lots more options on hotels in Cannes. Though,
There's a lot more happening. There were so many parties last night as well.
There was. I don't know if you managed to see Sting last night.
No, I did not.
Incredible. Yeah.
We went through 5 other parties.
Up on stage.
So we did fine. I think there was more parties last night than the PTC.
Yeah, I think
one night.
Well, it's a long way to get to PTC these days, right?
Yeah. But look, also, what's been a long way, it's how far the industry has come. I mean, over the decades, but especially over the last 6 months. And this goes all the way to Trump in January announcing Stargate, $500 billion to the US. There's been some top-ups on top of that with Oracle and all this sort of stuff. Then we had Macron in France, we had Brussels announcing hundreds of billions of dollars into AI factories in the EU as well. You look into Asia, you've got China, you got DeepSeek in China. We've got things in China that we don't even know about, so it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of like headlines, right?
Yeah.
But underneath there,
it's
a good one. But I think when you look at what's really actually happening, right? So in the UK, for example, you've got this crazy guy in charge, Starmer the Harmer, we call him. But he's announcing 3 gigawatts in Northumbria. And it's going to individuals that have never built data centers, but actually we can't power it. We don't have 3 gigawatts, right? And you've got Ed Miliband saying we're going to go net zero by planting a load of wind turbines, but that doesn't run data centers. It's a total lack of understanding by leadership globally on what it takes to do the AI things that they're talking about. And I think this is a real challenge. It's an opportunity for the industry because there'll be, doors will be open to do these things. But the governments don't have a clue as to how to do it properly. And I think we're in for some interesting rides in most countries when it comes down to it. I think the people that are closest probably on the AI front is France, right? But they also have their nuclear play sorted. And you really need nuclear solutions to deliver the kind of quantity of megawatts that AI is going to need over the coming years. And we've seen over the last 6 months, megawatt upon megawatt being delivered in huge LLM platforms for all the hyperscalers, Microsoft, Google, everyone. But we're going to see another couple of years of that, right? And I don't think the temporary pause that Microsoft have announced lasts any longer than another month or so if it's not already stopped.
Yeah. It's a reassessment. It's not.
And it's really going to fly for another 2 months in that size. Then they're going to move into the kind of the inference models. And the inference models are going to be 10 to 30 megawatts. Perfect for these, non-flat D markets where you can find that size of power. But you're going to have hundreds of these things across the world, right? And they're going to dwarf the LLM platforms over the next 5 to 7 years. And by the way, people are still outsourcing and moving to the cloud. So that hasn't finished. And a lot of that capacity has been cannibalized over the last few years by the hyperscalers trying to get into the AI story. So that's got to be replaced. It's looking very good for the data center industry over the next decade, I think.
Yeah. But do you think, where's the potential problem? Where's the potential challenge around the corner where this could go not so well? What's the red flags?
The obvious thing, right, is the impact. So first of all, getting the power is a real problem, and as I said, I don't think people truly understand how big a problem that is. The second thing is the environmental impacts, right? So, these things are gonna emit things we don't want, right? So carbon gases, all these things, unless of course you go nuclear. But we need to be as conscious of building the AI platforms as we need to be conscious of solving the solution or the issues that the platforms create. putting AI in charge of resolving the sustainability challenge is probably the right thing to do.
Do you see data centers actually understanding how to implement that? Or you're talking about not just even data centers, also the grid side of the equation?
It's everyone. You know, at the moment, there's a kind of a groundswell of people in most geographies starting to understand that data centers exist and starting to say these terrible energy-hungry monsters are a danger to our society. But what they're missing is the data center consumes nothing. We are the consumers of the power, right? Every time Greta Thunberg tweets, "This is a terrible data center," she's consuming the energy within the data center, right? So we are not in a position, we don't feel comfortable now to give up our iPhones and our storage and our AI access, and so we're saying we're actually saying these terrible guzzlers of power, without realizing that the building is the most efficient way to deliver what we want and what we expect. So I think that's the other thing about it, is that the populace needs to take responsibility on how it is consuming the power.
There's a lot of education to be done as well. But do you think with all these Braganomics, do you think data centers are becoming politicized?
Yeah.
So you have Trump talking about it, which means some people that might not like him that much might become against data centers. You have the same in France, people that don't like Macron might turn against data centers.
Yep.
It's happening all over the place. When it becomes a political flag, people will turn against it because they are against their political party, they're against the
Absolutely,
agenda.
absolutely. But I think, again, if people were educated to the point of understanding what goes on in a data center, because what goes on in a data center is actually what we do. Yeah. You and I and everybody else, that's what it is. Yeah. So from that point of view, they shouldn't be saying data centers are bad. They should be saying data centers are good, how do we make them better?
Yeah, because the economic deliverance into the GDP is massive.
It's huge.
When we talk about this.
And also, right, so we don't have enough employment capacity coming into the sector, because they think about the 15 engineers you need running around a data center to maintain it. Yeah. They don't see the construction industry, the finance industry, all the sustainability dynamics, all of that goes into the whole ecosystem, right? That employs hundreds of thousands of people.
And I think the ecosystem is the right word here, because we tend to just look at this as one facility, one
building,
architectural building. But it's not. It is a much bigger network of things.
So big, and more these things are connected on a global basis, right? And you can't just pull something out of that ecosystem without it impacting a hell of a lot of things, right?
Yeah, but it's life.
It is
like
life.
Every decision has a consequence.
Indeed. If you shut a main road in London or you shut a main road in Paris, the traffic snarl up everywhere that it creates is horrendous. So, that's exactly what we have now with the internet. Right?
Do you think it would be good for this industry to be recognized as an electricity-intensive industry? Some countries are looking to it. The US is a bit ahead on that front, where you could get maybe some cheaper electricity, you could get maybe some CO2 tax cut. Would that be a good thing? Would that not endanger going to a utility type of level?
Well, if you look at data centers not as the building, but what goes on within it, and you say that actually most of the economy now is driven by some version of technology that depends on the data center. So you could say if you want to drive growth in an industry or in a country, you would then promote the consumption, which is counterintuitive, of course, but you would promote the consumption of power in these fields. So I think that's something probably that we should look at.
When you look into the finance and investment space, I mean, you've sold one of the biggest businesses in the 2020s. What's your take on it? I mean, M&A went like this, it kind of flattened a little bit, but now we're getting hints that it's going to go back up again.
Yeah, look, I mean, so the good news is, so there has been a hiatus on transactions. The good news is these companies still continue to grow during that time, so they haven't lost value. But I think what you're seeing now is people's uncertainty, in particular around what Trump's doing, for example, right? I don't necessarily disagree with Trump's position and his way about it, but saying 50% tariff and then saying, oh, okay, forget that, we'll do 5%. No one can plan. No one can kind of legislate for the medium term. So no one's going to make investments while they don't know the impact of these decisions. So once that stabilizes, and I think eventually he gets bored with all that and turns to something else, but once that stabilizes, I think M&A comes back in a very big way. Yeah. Because people there's so much capital that's desperate to get into this sector, right? And right the way through pension funds, and you know, they're looking at growth stocks, but they're also looking at passive, you know, like yield stocks from the data center industry. And if you've got a blue chip Microsoft, Google, or whatever as a customer for 20 years, that you know, it's just throwing off cash. It's good for a pension, right? So I think there's plenty of new money coming into the sector that didn't really understand it before. And you know, the infra funds now are all over the data centers, and they don't want to touch office buildings. You know, there's plenty more money to be used in M&A to build platforms. And the bigger platforms you can make, the more efficient with the head office costs that you can be across that platform. So I think there's more M&A to come, much more.
What do you think of IPOs? Because we are seeing them start popping up in Asia a little bit more. There's rumors in Europe of some players in Europe also looking into potential IPOs.
You know,
the markets are not very stable.
Yeah,
maybe it's not.
I'm not a great fan of the markets, right? I think in particular the UK, you can forget AIM as a listing. It's just horrendous, right? There's no liquidity, no nothing, and the main market is pretty limp as well, right? The multiples aren't there that you can achieve on the private environment. Right, so when private equity gets in, they'll pay a premium, they'll sweat the asset well, and they'll sell probably to another private equity house at a successful return. Whereas listed markets, you know, if Putin decides to have a heavier look at Finland, your market goes down. There's no reflection on the quality of the company, right? So for me, I'm not a fan of public markets.
Yeah, we live in a very uncertain, hard to plan world, and everything is up and down.
Exactly, and when you've got sort of Mrs. Smith from Antibes buys 5 shares and the share price does this, you know, you can't legislate for that. It's, you know, if you've got a business that's running and is successful, you expect the value of that business to increase.
Okay. One thing that we're also seeing a lot is it's a lot of new logos coming to market. There's a lot of new platforms, especially for this AI revolution. There's new brands being launched almost every 2 weeks. There's a new company popping up. How does that go against the more established players? How does an Equinix, how does a Digital Realty, which has a lot of legacy, a lot of older facilities, how does that play into this game?
I think one of the angles that these new logos are addressing is the fact that the Equinixes, Digital Realties of the world are so big now, right? When you go to them and say, can I have some capacity? First of all, if you know, 5 racks, don't even talk to me. Secondly, here's your contract, right? It's non-negotiable. That's the deal, that's the price. And a lot of people want more flexibility, right? So they want more localized service. They want to engage with someone and say, if I do this, can you help me migrate? All these. And so having a smaller player that's willing to be a bit more flexible, a bit more dynamic, and a bit more sort of engaging with a customer, there's room for that. You know, Equinix does a great job. They're still doing their thing, right? But there's room for this smaller play, which is a more personalized regional approach to people as well.
Okay. Which markets do you think, and this could be Europe or outside of Europe, I know we are in Cannes, but we can talk globally, which geographies do you think are going to benefit the most in the next 5 years?
You know, I think every geography is still growing very fast, right? So what you're seeing is the flat Ds are starved of power. But they're still mature markets, so the regions within those, so instead of London, you go to Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Glasgow. Instead of Amsterdam, you go to Rotterdam and Utrecht. And so I think those markets very much are where the growth is going to push out. Simply logistically, it makes sense, and you can't get the power in the flat Ds. The second thing, obviously, you've got the emerging markets, so you know, we've seen some progress in places like Africa, right? Terraco was a great business, but you've got you know, Rack Center in Nigeria, you've got IX Africa in Kenya. But there's still relatively small deployments on a huge market. So at some point, and maybe it's not over the next 2 to 3 years, but maybe it's beyond that, you'll see huge growth in Africa. Asia at the moment is on fire everywhere. India is on fire. You know, the amount of gigawatts they're asking, they're looking for gigawatt campuses at a time here, right? And that's something that's just a demonstration of their ability to catch up rapidly in a technology basis.
But in those markets, when you look for gigawatts, like that sort of scale of development, is it achievable or is it a dream? Because grid stability in those countries, it's not there. You do have to build the power.
Africa's really tricky, right? But I think in India, you know, you need to partner with locals, and you need that commitment of building the substation next door. and saying, I'm dedicating, this is for me,
Yeah.
right? And so, and you need the resilience, right? So, I remember I was speaking with a rack center in Nigeria. Their first data center there, a couple of megawatts, was running 24/7 on diesels because they couldn't rely on the grid,
Yeah.
right? So, and the cost was expensive because you're running permanently with diesel fuel. It's not quite as bad now, but but in India, for example, the network is relatively stable now. So, especially if you're building a 100 megawatt substation next to your 100 megawatt data center, and the cost is about the same. So, $10 million per megawatt to build a data center, $10 million per megawatt to build the substation. So the hyperscalers are saying, well, do both for me and just double my rent, and I'll take the whole lot.
Okay. What's one thing that I have not asked you that would like to that I should have asked you about the industry?
I think the key thing, right, is that people are waking up to the fact that the industry needs more people attracted to it. And I was in Imperial College last week with the iMasons guys, Simon Allen, right? And we were
the Duke of Edinburgh.
Yes,
yesterday,
and the Duke of Edinburgh as well. So basically saying that, graduates, we need you, and it doesn't matter whether you're in finance. Don't think of this as data centers. We need finance people. We need sustainability people. We need engineers. We need everybody needs to come to this industry. And by the way, this is the most exciting industry on the planet right now, and the most important one to the planet, right? And what it delivers in terms of AI's future and the risks that it presents to the planet. It is very important as an industry, and people need to be aware and come to work in that industry from all walks of life.
Yeah, there's a tremendous lack of attention and understanding of what it delivers from
Indeed.
the outside population.
And even if someone wants to be a banker, right, wants to be in the finance industry, actually, they should be coming to data centers because the amount of finance work that goes on now, funding these huge projects, so you can be in your chosen sector, working in this industry.
Nice. What's next for you, though? What's in terms of books, philanthropy, any mountains to hike, any seas to sail?
I spend probably 50% of my time giving back now, and I've been so lucky to meet amazing people like your good self and everyone in the industry. And there's so many young people coming up now that I feel like I almost need to pass the baton and go and get another beer.
Sounds like a good plan to me. Right, last question. One word to describe 2025.
Changeable.
Changeable. I like that.
Yeah,
No one has used that.
There's plenty of opportunity, right? But plenty of risk. Confused. Confused could be another good word. But yeah, changeable.
Yeah, sounds good. Michael Tobin, thank you so much for talking to me.
Pleasure.
As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website and social media for the latest digital infrastructure news from across the globe. At Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.